Welcome to The Kitchen Table, a conversation about faith, music, and culture. Join Shine.fm's ministry director Brian McIntyre Utter and his 18-year-old son Jake around the table for this week's chat.
Welcome to The Kitchen Table. This is episode number 33.
33.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Jake.
Thanks for tuning in this week. We're so glad that you're here. If you are just joining us for the first time on The Kitchen Table, this is a program that we started last year where we like to celebrate generations. I'm father, Jake is son, and we do this because we have a purpose behind it. We do this because we want to foster more parents and children having conversations around the faith issues, and that's why we started this. It gives us a great opportunity to continue talking now that Jake's in college and have these faith conversations, dive into things, but also allows you and your children, teenager, young adult to listen as well. Just have those conversations. Hopefully it's discussion sparks.
I actually talked about that in a paper that I wrote.
You did?
I'm in a class called Christian Education. We had to write a paper on the chapter that we read. And in the chapter, it's talking about how in the Old Testament, it was the parents' responsibility to enforce God's law onto their children.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I find that really inspirational, and it's very rare to see that in today's age. And so I talked about how we had a podcast and that the same idea of the parents teaching, I always told them about your saying that your first mission field is your family.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I wrote about.
Okay. That's good. Did you get a good grade on it?
I haven't gotten a grade back yet.
Okay. All right. Just checking. Well, what inspired the conversation this week? We're going to be talking around the topic of when God moves us out of our comfort zone. And let's face it, he does that a lot. Mm-hmm. And what kind of started me thinking about this conversation was I read an article this week, I don't know if you saw it, about a church in Texas. It is a Gateway Church. It's a large church, multiple campus sites. Their pastor, Robert Morris, I've heard him speak. He's great. They planted a new church last November that moved them outside of their comfort zone. It was actually planted at the Cofield Unit Maximum Security Prison, which is in Anderson County, Texas. They planted a church in the prison.
Really?
And so that first Sunday last November that they planted this church, they had 650 inmates that came to the first service. Since November to today, 500 men have dedicated their lives to Jesus.
Really? That's awesome.
Can you imagine when someone said, you know, we have all these campuses and we're growing. What do you think about planting a church in a prison? And that definitely probably was a stretch. It reminded me of a story from my experience. We were missionaries for many years in South America. You leave your culture and go to another culture, absolutely you're stretched. You're outside your comfort zone. You just have to know that God is with you. The years that we spent in South America, I had an opportunity to go into a prison. Now, prisons outside the United States are nothing like prisons inside the United States. They are horrible conditions. There are prisons that in the world that don't even give their inmates food. It's up to the family of that inmate to bring them food. We had to do this in the local jail when we lived in Argentina. We had a family in our church who had a member of their family was incarcerated, and the church took turns taking meals to the jail. I don't know if you remember that or not.
I don't. Nope.
There's this maximum security prison in south of Buenos Aires, Argentina, where we lived, and I was invited to participate in an event at the prison. Of course, we worked in media in South America, and we were producing radio programs in Spanish and sending those out to radio stations in Latin America. And a lot of the Christian artists that are there, the bands, the singers, they don't have the distribution that we have here in the U.S. And so we became friends with a couple of bands from Argentina, and they knew we were mailing out radio programs to 30-some countries, and they asked if they could put music into our package because they wanted to get their music out to radio stations as well. They had to do it on their own.
Yeah.
We absolutely agreed to it. We didn't charge them anything for it. This band, Argentine band called Kiosco, it's a made-up word. Koinonia is one of the words they put together there. They participate in this event every year, and so they invited me along to this prison. And this ministry in this prison started when a lady started attending a church whose husband was incarcerated there. And the church said, you know what, we want to help reach out to this husband who is incarcerated. I don't know if he'll ever be paroled because of what he did. They still wanted to reach out to him. And so they did that. This husband came to Christ. And eventually, this husband started being discipled and really has become a pastor within the prison.
Thanks for listening to The Kitchen Table. We're a father-son podcast talking about faith, music, and culture.
At this prison, they have family day. So all the inmates who have good behavior are allowed to gather in the main yard, and their families are allowed to come in. spouses and kids to celebrate Family Day. They have a big picnic. And so this church decided to use that family day as an opportunity to share Jesus. So they set up a stage, they brought in a band, they share the gospel to all these families that are gathered in this prison. They've done this for several years. Literally, hundreds of inmates in this prison have come to Christ through this. This took me outside my comfort zone. I mean, we're getting up. I'm in a van with a band. We're driving to this prison. You know, the van's full of amplifiers and guitars and a drum kit and the whole bit. And we get to this prison, which has walls that are probably about 25 feet tall, and they're so thick that the guards actually walk on top of the wall. I mean, it's like a sidewalk on top of this wall. And of course, you have guard towers at all these different spots. Now, we had to bring the vehicle into the prison, so we had to go through all kinds of checkpoints. They had to search everything. And then we had to get out, and we had to be searched as well. And when I say we were searched, I had to take off more clothing than I was comfortable taking off. I mean, we finally get through all this process, which takes a couple of hours. We're setting up all the gear. What's happened at that prison, when you get taken out of your comfort zone, you see how God is using you. And God was using that church to reach this prison. So one of the guys there, the pastor of this, the inmate who's now the pastor, he said, "Hey, I want to show you the miracles of this prison." They took me around this prison, and the way they have it lined out, if you can imagine like a big wagon wheel, and the center hub of that wheel, that would be like the guard house. And then going out from that center hub would be these spokes. That would be rooms on either side of the spokes coming from the guardhouse. At the end of those spokes, it's just a dead end. It's basically just a long, thin building going out in all different directions from this hub. And so they said, "We want to show you a typical row house here at the prison and what that looks like." So we went to one, and we walk into this spoke, so to speak, this hallway, and the odor hits you immediately. It is dirty. There are guys that are there who didn't have good behavior, weren't allowed to come out and spend time with their family that day. Profanity being thrown around. Just a horrible atmosphere. We talked to a guy who was irate that he wasn't able to get out. He didn't have good behavior. And this is a guy who was probably mid-20s, yet he didn't have a shirt on, had lots of tattoos. He had scars all over his torso, either knife or bullet wounds. And we were able to talk to him, sort of calm him down, assure him. We prayed with him. So we left that wagon wheel, so to speak, and went to another one. He said, "Now I want to show you the difference that Christ makes in people's lives." And so we went into this other hallway, this other spoke of this wagon wheel. This one, the walls were painted. They had scripture verses painted on the walls. The hallway was clean. It didn't have an odor. All the doors to the cells were wide open because the inmates were out with their families. All the beds were made. On the beds were their Bibles. And he said, everyone in this hallway here has come to know Christ. And we kept walking down this hallway, looking at these different rooms, and I was kind of curious as to why we were continuing to go down, because you see one cell, they look identical, you know. Yeah. And we got to the end of this hallway. At the end of the hallway, they had a small table there at the end of the hall, and sitting on the table was a small transistor radio, sort of like a boom box. And he said, "I want to show you, this is one of the miracles we have here." And so he turned on this boom box, and it was playing a Christian radio station from Buenos Aires. Now, we're south of Buenos Aires quite a bit. And I said, "Oh, I knew this radio station." I said, do they send you guys CDs or tapes that you can play on the boombox? He says, "No, that's the radio station." And I'm thinking, well, how is that even possible? Because that radio station doesn't reach down this far. He says, here, I want you to do something. He goes, "Pick up the boombox and just move it a foot to the right." So I grabbed the handle, I put it to the right, and it was static. He said, "Now I want you to put it back." Crystal clear. He said, "Now pick it up and move it to the left." Static. He said, "Now put it back right there in the center." And I put it back there, and it came in crystal clear. There's no reason why that radio station should have reached that specific spot, but it did. That's a miracle. Yeah. He goes, "I want to show you another miracle." He said, "See, here at the prison, because of the quality of the food that we get, we have to be very creative in how we feed our inmates. And so we, as a church, wanted to start a garden. They had property there, open yard. The problem was their soil was very red, and the nutrients, it had too much acidity to it, and nothing would grow there. They brought in specialists to figure out how they could treat the soil. They said, "No, forget about it. It's not going to happen." And so this inmate with the other inmates that have come to Christ has said, "You know what? We're just going to pray to God." And so they went out to the field there. They formed a circle around the field, and they prayed. And they said, "We're going to just try. We're going to believe God's going to do it." And so we around the corner of one of these buildings, and there is the most incredible, lush garden you ever saw in your life.
That's awesome.
You have vegetables everywhere. And they dug these trenches around, like in squares, and the trenches were half full of water. And you can still see the soil's red, and nothing should be growing there. And I asked him, is that water around the trench, is that for irrigation? He said, oh, no, that's actually to keep ants from getting to the vegetables. And so, but incredible tomatoes, huge tomatoes, cucumbers, squashes, just growing in the soil where it shouldn't be growing. They had chickens and their own little chicken coop, and this is how they're feeding the inmates based upon that ministry. That's another miracle of what God is doing there.
Thanks for listening to The Kitchen Table. We're a father-son podcast talking about faith, music, and culture.
The main miracle of this is that prison, from the warden of the prison, 90% have come to Christ. Now, this is a maximum security prison, and that's where they put the worst of the worst, and 90% of them have come to Christ. So much so that this inmate pastor has a key to his own cell. The warden gave him a key and said, if you need to go out and call on people and pray with people, here's a key so you can come and go as you like. It's just bizarre.
Funny.
I shared the story because, man, I was uncomfortable. It put me outside my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this church, they were completely uncomfortable doing this. But see how God is using that when we trust him to be outside of our comfort zone.
When God puts us in our uncomfortable situation that we don't want to be in, really, that is where we see God most. For me, I have a tiny story. So the special needs camp that I work at every summer, I was very nervous going into it. I didn't think that I was going to do a good job. I thought I was going to kind of like accidentally kill my camper because I'm 14. But that week was where I saw God work in the most, and in the most unpredictable way.
Yeah. Over and over again, we read about men and women in the Bible who do great things for God. And if you really look at those stories, the Bible doesn't say great men and women. No. God chooses, Jesus chooses ordinary people, the last person you would expect to do that. He picks them, and they do great things. Now, one of the things that all these men and women of the Bible have in common, and it's a thing that when we step outside of our comfort zone that we have in common with them, is this. We each have a big heart for God. God is stirring in our hearts to do something for his glory. He's calling us to step outside of our comfort zone, to do something unusual, to do something completely counterculture to make his kingdom great. You don't have to be a pastor. You don't have to be a missionary. You don't have to be a super spiritual star or hero. All you have to do is have a heart for God, a willingness on your own to get outside of your comfort zone. Scripture says, Joshua 1:9, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid and do not be dismayed. Our Lord your God is with you wherever you go, including outside your comfort zone. John 15:16 says, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit shall abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These are promises from Scripture that when we step outside of our comfort zone, God is with us. Isaiah 42:16, and I will lead the blind in a way they did not know. In paths that they have not known, I will guide them. I will turn the darkness before them into light, the rough places into level ground. These are the things I do, and I do not forsake them. It is natural for us to cling to what is easy and acceptable in our lives. But God wants us to step away from what's comfortable. Acts 10, you have the story of Peter and Cornelius. They're two very different people. They come from different political arenas. They are different cultures, yet God wants them to talk. Peter is a devout Jew, no doubt raised with the teachings that Gentiles like Cornelius were not God's people, and you're not supposed to associate them. That's awkward, right? It'd be like if, who would be the most awkward conversation you would have to have? Queen Elizabeth?
Yeah.
If you were invited to tea with Queen Elizabeth, how awkward would that be?
Yeah, very.
In Acts 10, verse 29, Peter says this, so when I was sent for, I came without raising any objection. Peter didn't question why he was supposed to go speak to Cornelius, someone completely different with him. He just heard God's instruction, and he obeyed, even though it was calling him out of his comfort zone. Sometimes God instructs us away from what is comfortable and familiar and toward the unknown. What would our world look like if we simply obeyed no matter the consequences? What would it look like?
I feel that if we were to actually obey, I talked about this in my paper too, it would be a world full of God. I feel like the image of God is so distorted now because we don't obey. I know for me that I've struggled with doubt because you can't see God, but you see God through through people because we are the Imago Dei. We are the image of God.
At a men's Bible study last night, we were doing the story of the rich man who came running to Jesus. What must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus looked at him and he loved him. Jesus loved him. And that's what jumped out at me as we were studying this. Jesus loved him enough to give him the harsh instruction that he needed to give everything away and follow him. So no matter what the consequences, what would the world look like if God tells us to give away everything we own and we obey? If God tells us that we're supposed to adopt an orphan and we obey? If God tells us you need to pack up your family, whatever you can carry in suitcases, and you need to move to China, and we obey? Or maybe not as far as China. What if we're supposed to pack up and move our family to the rough side of town?
Thanks for listening to The Kitchen Table. We're a father-son podcast talking about faith, music, and culture.
Jeremiah 29:11. Everyone knows this verse. Many of you have heard it, I'm sure. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. When we step outside our comfort zone, it's all about trusting God. I saw this tweet this week and actually reposted it from a guy named John Patton. What sustains courage on the mission field was the question. He said this: the assurance that not one bullet can pierce you, not one knife can cut you, and not one hand can harm you without permission of our sovereign Christ. So trusting God in circumstances, the uncomfortable ways of life. I am only as safe as God allows me to be. Psalm 3:1-3 says, O Lord, how many are your foes? Many are rising against me. Many are saying, O my soul, there is no salvation for him in God. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory and the lifter of my head. When we step outside our comfort zone, especially as parents, families, these are great opportunities to teach our children. You had the experience, you lived a 30-year life in South America up to this point.
Yeah.
There are many lessons through that. It shaped you in a different way from growing up completely in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And we're probably thinking, well, it's so difficult. I want to shelter my kids from difficult things. No matter where we live, this is a challenge. When we encounter difficult situations outside of that comfort zone, this gives us opportunity to talk about God and show our kids just how much we need Jesus. We cannot keep little eyes from seeing hard things as much as we try as parents. We have to teach who God is and why we need him so desperately. It's compassion. Look at the life of Jesus. Jesus came to a broken world and loved people when it wasn't always comfortable to do so. And he died a very painful death that really I deserve. And all he's asking me to do, stepping out of that comfort zone, is to pick up my cross and to follow him. That means sometimes giving up my dreams. Paul says, 1 Corinthians 2:9, what no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him. That comes down to trust. God stretches us. I brought a rubber band into the studio today. As an example, I'm going to try to, when God stretches us, before we snap back, why does he do it? Why does God stretch us?
Help us grow.
Yeah. He takes us through uncomfortable places in our life, times of stretching. There is a lesson or two in the middle of that tightness. When you stretch that rubber band, I'm stretching this rubber band out. It gets real tight, right? But before it snaps, before it breaks, that's when God steps in. Why would God want to stretch me? Why would he want to stretch you? Could it be that there is something that we need to learn? And maybe he allows us to come to that point of just before it snaps, because it's at that point where he finally gets our attention. And that's at the point where we cry out to him. Lessons in time of stretching many times have to do with patience, perseverance, and most importantly, trust. I always look into myself, I don't know about you, to try to figure out the situation and deal with the situation myself. And I reach that snapping point where I finally say, I can't do this anymore. And then God says to me, well, why did you insist on doing it your way to begin with? I think God sees us many times getting into those stretchy situations of life, and he lets us stretch all the way out just to the point of breaking, and then he jumps in to help us. At that point, he has our undivided attention, and the lesson that he wants to teach us will be firmly implanted in our hearts. That's why he does that.
Yeah.
Teachable moments.
Thanks for listening to The Kitchen Table. We're a father-son podcast talking about faith, music, and culture.
I had a teachable moment when I lived in South America. Should I share that?
Yeah.
My team, we produce radio and television in South America. And we completed a class in some software that we were learning, and I took the team out to celebrate. As we were coming back and I was dropping them off at their different houses, I pull up in front of a young lady's house, and she gets out of the car to go into her home, and there's a couple others in the car with me. And as she was getting out, a car came up behind us and pulled in front of my car. As it was stopped, 5 men jumped out with automatic weapons. They run towards us. The one runs towards me. He reaches out, he grabs my front pocket, and he shakes the change in there, and he says, hand it over. And he reaches in my back pocket, he pulls out my wallet. And And they take everything we have, they jump in my car, and they drive away. And I'm standing in the middle of the street as they're driving away while my other friends, who had more experience in this apparently, they're hiding behind the tree. But once they left, of course, we had to do the police report. It was late at night. The police didn't want to come out. That was their response when we called them. They said, you can come down to the station and fill out that report.
Yeah.
I went down to the police station near where we lived, and it's like 1 o'clock in the morning by this time. And I'm giving the report, and they're asking me all these questions, what color was the car that they were driving? What were they wearing? Did they have any, noticeable tattoos or piercings, or what color was their hair? Anything that made them stand out. Happened so fast, I didn't know any of the details. Gave a really good description of the gun I had poked in my face, for sure. But as I was there talking with that detective, I noticed out his office door across the hall from him was a door made of metal, this giant, massive metal door that had this opening right in the middle, this small little rectangle slot opening. And I realized what caught my attention was, because it was dark in the room, it was a holding cell. And what caught my attention was someone inside the holding cell lit a cigarette inside, and that little glow, flicker, whatever caught my attention. You could see that there were these shadow figures of several people crammed into this cell. And outside the cell was a barrel that was sitting outside in the hallway where they could reach through the slot and they could get a drink. They drink a thing down there called mate, and they could get mate and drink that. And next to the water, the mate, was a transistor radio. And I'm like, again, God taking me out of my comfort zone, again stretching me to show me this image, teaching me. This is a lesson. You see those guys are sitting in that little dark room. They're probably at the lowest point in their life. They have nowhere to go. But at that lowest point, they could stick their hand through that slot and they could turn on a radio and they could hear something that we've produced about the hope in Jesus Christ, and that could be it for them. And that's just God confirming, hey, I made you step outside your comfort zone, and hey, I've stretched you as much as you possibly can, and you just went through this horrific experience, but there's a purpose to it. Stretching makes us grow. James 1:2-4 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything." God will send us seasons of stretching into our lives to make us grow into the Christians He wants us to be. Remember this: when God asks you to step outside your comfort zone, it will stretch you, and He wants you to grow. Growth is constant and essential when you follow Christ. And the best way to grow is by stretching this rubber band. No, it's God stretching us through a challenge.
With stretching our comfort zone, it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be well worth it. When we're in that time of not being in our comfort zone, just remember it'll be worth it.
So when God asks you to do something that just seems bizarre, confusing, there's no way you're qualified for it. Just know He's there with you. Might not feel like it at the time,
No, it won't.
but just hang tight.
Yeah.
All right, well, that wraps up the faith conversation today. Let's move into a segment that we call Music Matters. Music Matters is a time where we celebrate the generational differences of music. I think I have a pretty good grasp on what the new music is, but it's completely different from what Jake listens to. And it's not stylistically different, because I like many of the stuff you listen to. It's just you find this stuff that I can't. And so what we do is I bring a new song, Jake brings a new song, and then I bring an oldie but goldie in, and we share something from a day gone by. The new song from me today, new artist, well, not necessarily a new artist. You don't know his name perhaps because he's a part of Elevation Worship, worship leader for like 15 years now. His name is Mac Brock. You know the name?
No, but I know Elevation.
You know the song Do It Again?
Yeah.
He wrote that song.
Okay.
All right. So he has a new song. I heard it. I love it. I think it's great. It's going to be a great worship song. I know you will like it too, Jake. I'm going to have Mac share a little bit about the song. We'll hear a clip from a song. So here's Mac Brock with Greater Things.
So the story behind Greater Things is I just really wanted to write a song that declared God's faithfulness, and how no matter what season we're in, no matter what we might be walking through, God never changes. He's always right there with us. He's always walking ahead of us. He's always guarding our back. And we can just rest in that fact that He is always looking out for what's best for His children.
I like the message in that song.
Just powerful. Just
It
a
is.
powerful worship song.
It is. My song this week, I have kind of had a tough week. It's been a very stressful week, just with auditions and just a lot going in my life. And a song that I found, it's not new, but new meaning behind it. That's what the thing I love about music is that you can hear it once and hear it again, and then it's completely different. But the song is Peace Be Still. I changed it up on you. It's not the song that I told you before.
I'm going to have to change my notes here.
I know, but it's Peace Be Still by The Belonging Co.
The Belonging Co. Company?
It says, it's company? I don't know. It just says Co. The chorus goes, peace be still, say the word and I will. Set my feet upon the sea till I'm dancing in the deep. Oh, peace be still, you are here and so it is well. Even when my eyes can't see, I will trust the voice that speaks. I also think this ties in with our faith discussion today, because even when my eyes can't see, we still know that he's there. So here's a snippet of Peace Be Still by The Belonging Co.
Great song. Again, I have no idea who that group was. You introduced a new one to me.
Really?
Yeah, very good. All right, let's go back in time now. Time warp. I don't have a sound effect for that, so we'll have to work on it. This week, I saw a video that Mark Hall, the lead singer of Casting Crowns, did. Of course, Mark had cancer a couple years ago, and they removed one of his kidneys, and so he's a cancer survivor.
Yeah.
And there's an organization called Band Against Cancer that he's a part of now, and they did a campaign called #StrongSong, a song that just gives you strength through your cancer journey. And so he shared a song that I'd forgotten about, and when he shared about it, I'm like, oh, I remember that song. It was so great. And I don't even know what number it hit on the charts. I just remember playing it years ago. It's from 1994. It's a Canadian band called The Cry. They're actually from French-speaking Canada.
Really?
The brothers Jean-Luc and Yves, if that tells you anything.
Yep.
All right, and they still record in French, but they had this, couple hits here in the U.S. in English, and this is one of them. The band is called The Cry. It's with a K. This song is called Take My Hand.
Take my hand and walk where I lead. You will never be alone. Faith is to be sure of what you hope for.
Interesting. I like it.
Again, it's just goes back to our theme of when God moves us out of our comfort zone and trusting in Him.
Yeah.
Take my hand and lead me. That's just the way it is. So that wraps up Music Matters for today. Time now to work our way into Culture Shock. All right, Culture Shock this week. If you saw this blowback, I guess, CNBC did a story about how children cost too much. Yeah. The writer of the story is Yoni Bloomberg, said, if you don't have kids, in short, you'll save a lot of money. The problem is he got a lot of blowback on this story. He basically says by the child's 18th birthday, the parents will spend $467,000 on that child. I don't agree with that at all. There's no way I spent that kind of money, because I don't have that kind of money on you for 18 years.
Yeah.
But anyway, he had blowback. Some of the responses back from different people, quote, no money can ever replace the joy of being a parent. Another quote, no amount of money in the world can bring the amount of happiness and pure joy that your children do. I never knew how full my life could be until I had my son. Another writer said, you can't put monetary value on family. Family is the greatest blessing of all. So I started to dig into this about the cost of a family. And remember, when Jake graduated from high school, we had graduation
I was
T-shirts.
about to bring this up.
And on the back of my T-shirt said what?
It said, you owe me a lot of money.
Yeah.
It was like a certain number. He did like the math.
$126,000 or something like that.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I was looking at, is that legit? Literally $500,000 to raise a child today. I found some government numbers from the U.S. Department of Agriculture that says it's probably closer to like $233,000. And again, that's an average. I'm sure it's a lot more money to raise a kid in New York City and Los Angeles than it is to raise a kid here in the Midwest. But again, family is so worth it.
Yeah.
There are sacrifices and there are rewards to family. So I thought I would share this. I found this great article that talked about raising kids, the sacrifices and the rewards. So what do you sacrifice? Guess what? You're going to sacrifice sleep. And it's not just the infant stages. Kids who are bursting to wake up with the sun, you're going to sacrifice sleep. The reward, however, and I know my wife loves this, snuggle time. Early morning wake-ups from super warm, delicious-smelling kids who crawl into bed and help us gradually come out of our sleep. That's a reward of kids waking up early. You're going to sacrifice travel. Some couples have no problem traveling long distances for extended times with their kids. This writer says she can't. On hold for now are trips to Greece, Italy, Hawaii. The rewards are family travel. You now have a reason to visit Disney World.
Yeah.
Whereas before you can go on your own, but then you're like, really? You don't have any kids. You're going to Disney World and you just feel kind of awkward. Now you have kids, you can go. Opportunities to watch your children filled with wonder and amazement during the smallest of trips. That's the reward. Another sacrifice, lazy nights. Do you remember lazy nights where you could just sort of chill?
No, because you always made me clean.
I'm talking to parents, not necessarily you.
I don't
See, I had
remember
to
a
make
lazy
you.
night.
I had to make you clean, and that was not a lazy night for me either. Coming home from work, sitting on the couch for a few hours, got to watch Wheel of Fortune, whatever show. Maybe you're going to eat leftovers so you don't have to cook. Well, those lazy nights are gone when you have kids. However, the reward, random fits of laughter. Evenings that are filled with laughter as the result of old school games like hot potato, made-up games, constant attempts for little kids trying to make you giggle. That can be a reward for sacrificing that lazy night. Possibly going to sacrifice career growth. Maybe you don't want to take that promotion. It's going to take you away from home too much. This author says it's near impossible to climb a corporate ladder when you're taking care of young kids. The reward is you find a work-life balance. You get to enjoy millions of moments with your kids and the whole family, and that opportunity is not going to last forever. Remember, it's a season. You're going to sacrifice that vacation home somewhere, getting away on the weekend, during the summer. The reward is your home. You may not have a second home, but you feel blessed every day to have the first home filled with love, laughter, memories, a dog, complete family. You can sacrifice further education. You wanted to get another degree, another opportunity to learn, to share ideas, a chance for career growth. It's not feasible right now. The reward is you're going to learn. It's just going to be life lessons. You might not be learning in the educational setting, but guess what? Your kids teach you something new every day. Love learning from your kids, having to share their knowledge. Also love watching them learn. You're going to sacrifice more time to be creative, trying new recipes, new organizational techniques to clean up that craft room. You have boxes and boxes of photos actually printed out, but you don't have time to put them in albums. Maybe someday. I know my mother finally did that once she retired. I know because she sent a lot of
I
them
bet
home to
mom
me.
will do it.
I certainly hope so, yeah. But the reward of having kids is it inspires creativity. You might not get the opportunity to try out many of those new recipes, but you're going to get opportunities to make eggs and pizza and cookies and new things out of those kinds of things in order to get your kids to try them. Maybe putting eggs on a pizza, who knows?
Breakfast pizza.
You're going to sacrifice relaxing weekends, just like those lazy nights I mentioned earlier. Being able to stay in bed late on a Saturday morning.
Or Christmas.
Forget about Christmas.
You can attest
Up
to
at
that
the
one.
crack of dawn.
You can attest to that.
Before the crack of dawn. So sacrificing and relaxing weekends, your reward is chaos. Now, wait a minute. How can chaos be in a reward? You're going to have weekends that are filled with birthday parties, soccer practices, trips to the zoo, trying to convince your kids that yard work is fun. It's a fun family activity.
No, it's not. It's not.
We try.
It's not.
You will sacrifice financial freedom. Many of your decisions are financially driven, how you spend your money, how you save it. But when you're a parent, you have to consider the impact of those decisions are more than just you, but your family. So it is expensive to have kids, but the reward of those financial sacrifices is unconditional love. It's all worth it. You can't put a price tag on love. The love you give and receive when you have children is like nothing else you will ever experience. That unconditional love is worth every single sacrifice and then some. Well, that wraps up Culture Shock. And brings an end to our kitchen table episode for this week, talking about God moving us outside of our comfort zones. If God's moving you today outside of your comfort zone, challenging you to do something, just remember, He's there with you. You might be stretched. Trust Him, lean on Him, cry out to Him.
Seek peace in the hard times. Just remember that God is with you, even though it might not feel like it.
If you want to contact the Kitchen Table, there's a great way of doing that. You can be a part of the Kitchen Table group on the Shine.fm Facebook page. We have conversations there. We share some resources there as well. If you'd like to suggest a faith topic that we tackle, or maybe a song you'd like to hear as we're highlighting new music, or maybe something you find interesting happening and you want that to be a part of Culture Shock, hey, we're more than happy to take suggestions. So thank you so much. Again, it's the Kitchen Table group on the Shine.fm Facebook page, and we certainly appreciate you tuning in.
Have a great week, y'all.
Thanks for listening to The Kitchen Table on the Shine.fm podcast network from Olivet Nazarene University. Be sure to subscribe for more content delivered each week on faith, music, and culture.